Be me, U.S. Marine stationed in Okinawa, Japan. For those of you who don't know, Okinawa is an island south of Japan, literally covered in U.S. military bases, in a jungle.pdf. Get put on a temporary base security detail, get a job as corporal of the guard. Basically just sit in a little guard shack with an office and a TV, watching a radio. And if anything goes wrong, you go take care of it. Quiet Thursday night on duty. Pissing rain, sucking wind, thunder, lightning, etc. Get a call from a sentry on post about a young girl dressed as a nurse walking into the jungle by the gate. WTF.exe. Immediately assumed it's something weird. Get my Beretta, pepper spray, flashlight, radio, etc. It's raining even harder. Walk to area where this girl was spotted. I should explain that Okinawa was where the final and one of the bloodiest battles of World War II took place, and hundreds if not thousands of civilians were killed, so I already assumed it was a ghost or something. Get to gate, totally soaked. Talk to the sentry about what he saw. I don't know, man. It was a short local girl in white. She looked like a nurse. She went down that trail along the gate. Already knew that that trail led to these tombs. For those of you who aren't familiar, in Japan, there are these big tombs everywhere, and it's extremely disrespectful to trespass. People say you'll be cursed and haunted if you do. Well, that's not good. Walk up to path, shine flashlight into brush. Nothing. Cry out, ask if anyone's there. No one. Tired, wet, and a little spooked. So I just say screw it and go back because it's probably a ghost anyways. Tell the guy it was probably a cat or something. There are wildcats all over Okinawa. Yeah, right. 2 hours later, sentry relieved. Different guy at the gate. Sentry radios. Tells me he saw something walk into the brush. Damn it. It's like 2 a.m., windier than before, still pouring. The guy had no idea about what happened earlier. Go check it out again. Ask the sentry if it looked like a nurse. Yeah. Okay, at this point, I'm a little more curious, so I tell myself I'll actually go in this time. Get up there, cry out, still no one. Step over some bushes and go into the jungle. Immediate regret, but decide to keep going. It's so dark, flashlight just makes it creepier. Remember that there are a lot of snakes this time of year, also big-ass banana spiders. I'm pretty scared. Tell myself I'll keep going until I see the sign. They're big red and yellow signs, you can't miss them. It's a lot darker in the woods, but also seemed a lot quieter. I think the rain must have died down a little. Trail is going back a lot further than I remember. Sign should have been back there. I can't even see out of the jungle at this point. I'm so far back I can barely tell if I'm on the trail or not. I'm lost. Really starting to freak out. Tactical pause. Take a deep breath. Tell myself to stay calm. I could be getting shot at. Things could be worse after. Hear a soft moaning cry. Sends chills down my spine, stricken with fear. Ask if anyone is there. It gets louder. Keeps getting louder. Seems like it's getting closer. Feel presence walk immediately behind me. Say, forget this. Walk away from crying and whatever was behind me, which is further into the jungle. In before you're stupid. Feels like I'm walking on a hard surface instead of mud and standing water. Turn on flashlight. It's cobblestone. You're kidding me. Look around a little more. I'm within 20 feet of a giant tomb. Please, whoever is buried here, forgive me, I'm lost. Crying is still same distance from me as it was before, like it's following me. Stand there because I don't know what to do. Frozen with fear, crying is getting closer. All of a sudden, bloop. Cog, this is Echo 3 Alpha. Radio check over. Jump 30 feet in air and scream a little, as well as shit myself. Radio went off loud as hell. Roger Lima Charlie, out. Put radio away. As I'm putting it down, I notice the crying stopped. Look back up. Nurse girl is standing there at the foot of the tomb, looking at me. Sends a million chills down my spine. More scared than ever. She's a short Japanese girl. Must be early mid-teens. Pale as snow. Instantly turn around and run out of there. Keep running until I finally get out of the jungle. Completely different area than where I came in. Make it back to the shack, soaking wet, super shaken up. Next day I tell everyone. Guy who has been on island forever. Says he's seen this nurse before. Same with some of his buddies. Ever since, my lights in my room will turn off by themselves. Hear random knocks on a window. No one there. Things will get knocked over, etc. Still live here. Still haunted AF. One day my lights turned off. My roommate and I both saw a black figure. First reaction was to take a picture. Pic related. Feel nauseous and get goosebumps every time I look at it. No, it's not fake. This sounds unreal, more like a dream I had, and nobody else believes me. But you guys are more trained in occult bullshit, so what the hell? Be me, 19, visiting my grandfather in North Michigan. A bit of a backstory about Gramps. Grandpa lives in a cabin like a pioneer. I never really knew him too well, only saw him once every few years. All I really know about him is, back in the 70s he was in Nam. When I was 17, he confessed to me that he felt terrible about the things he had to do there. Apparently beat a kid to death with a shovel. After that, I kind of avoided him, too freaked out to talk to him, especially since he was clearly unstable. Old guilt caught up with him. Now he knows he's nearing the end of his life. Liver problems, refuses medication. Invited me over since I'm his last living relative, and he wants to spend time with me before he passes. At first I was hesitant, but I decided this is what my father would have wanted. After about 3 hours of driving, I get to his cabin. Nice place. Looks like it's made of Lincoln logs. He's waiting outside on his cabin porch, smoking a pipe in a rocking chair. Looks straight out of a cartoon, suspenders and all. Looks exhausted. Dark circles under his saggy eyes. He gets up and gives me a bear hug. He's trying to hug me as hard as he can, but he's clearly weak. We hug for a few minutes, mostly because I find it too awkward to break away. I remind myself that even though I only remember him for a few years, he's known me most of his life. Halfway through, he starts kind of breathing heavy on me, sniffles. Realize he's been crying silently. Eventually he breaks away, red-eyed. Come inside, Annan. Okay, Pa. Come inside to a very cozy cabin. It is getting cold, especially in Michigan, so he has the fire going. He has running water, gas stove, and 2 beds. One of them is very new in quality. I think he bought it just for me. When I get over the initial off-puttingness of his behavior, I begin to care for him. I kind of remember my grandfather, if that makes sense. The bond of family becomes newly important. Decide to be his live-in helper until he dies. That very day, he starts to make us some decaf, but halfway through he starts to sweat. I help him to his chair by the fire and finish the coffee. My coffee tastes like shit, but he's still very appreciative. Assures me that it's delicious. After the decaf, we get ready for bed. He lies on the beat-up small bed and tells me to sleep on the new one. When I tell him we should switch, he refuses. I guess he did buy it for me. He says his prayers and falls asleep. I can't stand watching this dying old man. my own flesh and blood, sleeping on that pile of junk. He's quite small and frail at this age, though not thin. With a bit of effort, I managed to lift him up gently and tuck him into the big bed. Move the small bed to the window and make sure to sleep facing it. That way the sun wakes me up. When the sun wakes me up, it's like 6 a.m. I slide the bed back and switch my grandpa back, lay on the good bed for another 20 minutes before I realize I can't fall asleep again. All that lifting woke me up. Decide to just prepare breakfast and pack his pipe for him. Go to an outhouse near his cabin because flushing might wake him up. When I'm done, I step outside. Notice something behind his cabin. It seems to be a gate holding 6 black horses. They're shackled in these massive metal chains. Each horse has a huge metal ring around their necks. They're all chained together and all to the ground. Since it's like 6 a.m. and the forest is dark, they look creepy as hell. I thought it might have been a trick of the light, but their faces looked messed up. Pick related is a horse skull. You know how most horses don't look like that skull? These did. Their eyes looked almost red. I thought it might just be a reflection like how cameras show red pupils. God, I was wrong. Stepped back inside to find Grandpa awake sitting on his bed. Talked about what we were going to do for the day. He said his back felt good enough today that he might want to do some fishing. Not to stroke my own ego, but I attribute that to me letting him sleep in a good bed. Let me tell you, he might as well have been sleeping on the floor. Whatever. After breakfast of eggs and bacon, I drive him to a pond near the house. We fish for a while, silent the entire time. Wasn't awkward though. It was a comfortable silence. I didn't catch anything, but he caught a 3-pounder. Had to help him reel it in. He was very proud of himself and that made me happy. Said he used to love to go out fishing. Told him we'd make it into dinner. On the drive back, I asked about the horses. I'd kind of forgotten about them since early morning. Instantly, I knew I shouldn't have asked him. His cheerful smile was replaced with a kind of stern grin. He looked like he was forcing himself to maintain a rapid, fleeting smile. Told me not to worry about it. They were just some pets. I almost listened to him, except he nervously quivered when he said worry. Never happened before or after, so I doubt it was just an old man thing. When we got back, he showed me how to gut and debone a fish. Marinated it in a dry rub for about 30 minutes while he took a break to puff on his pipe. While he was doing that, I opened the curtains to the back window and peered at the horses. They hadn't moved at all. They hadn't eaten or slept. They didn't look cold, but they were still shooting hot breath from their nose. I know because it was cold and I saw it. I stepped outside to talk to my grandpa about the horses. Pa, didn't you forget to feed the horses or something? You don't feed these types of horses, son. I had no clue what he meant, but every time I tried to ask, he would just ignore me and change the subject. When he was done, we stepped inside and had our dinner. I noticed he prayed extra long that night. Fast forward to the next morning. I just woke up with the sun and put my grandpa back into his bed. I decided to get a bit closer to the horses this time. Got just barely close enough so I could see them. I don't think they noticed me. Remembering it now sends shivers down my spine. Just as terrifying as I initially thought, if not more so. Shaggy, matted fur, deformed, bent out of shape skulls. I know 100% their rib cages should not have been indented like that. Their teeth looked like they had been chewing on rocks or something. It wasn't just their appearance though. I've been around deformed animals before. It doesn't really bother me so much. They had a messed up presence. Like the feeling in your stomach after you watch some effed up gore. Initially I'd felt bad for them, but now I just wanted them to die. Strangely, however, I also wanted to get closer. Just being around them made me weak in the knees. I couldn't do it. One of them looked me in the eyes, and if I hadn't just used the bathroom, I would have shit myself. Ran back into the cabin and hid. Grandpa was just starting to wake up. so I tried to forget about it and get to work. Today was supplies day, meaning we were going into town to refill on food, firewood, toiletries, etc. I decided to buy Grandpa a cake too, not for any special reason, just that it's important to have some fun while he could. Usually he just got someone to deliver him food, but it was good to get some exercise. Plus, his back was feeling fine. We rode into town and Grandpa said he was getting sick. Poor guy hadn't been in a car for a while. Motion sickness got to him and we had to pull over. After that, I realized we had to go quick. We got to a Giant, except they call him something else there. Good and Plenty, something like that. Pick everything up. I hide the cake from Grandpa to surprise him with it back at the cabin. When we get back, something's wrong. I feel that same stomach feeling. There's a racket coming from the back of the cabin. I pull up the car and step outside. The horses are going nuts. Littered on the floor behind them are some white balls. Grandpa tells me very sternly, "Get in the cabin." Shouldn't we drive away? Son, the worst thing we could do right now is try and escape. I have no clue what's going on. When we get inside, he starts explaining. Remember that he's an old man and he's injured, so I can hardly understand him. He starts talking about how he didn't know they were there when he bought the cabin. If he leaves, he's gonna die. They must have eaten something. From what I can piece together, if you feed them, they get stronger, and they can lure things in better. Once one of them got a bite, they got enough strength to lure in more and more. The most we can do is hope they run out of things to eat. Snap! A loud crack, like a whip, snaps through the air. Grandpa goes silent. What the hell was that, Pa? He stares at me, kind of empty-like. Looking back at it, he was accepting his death. One of them broke the chains. What the shit, what the shit, what the shit? Pa looks at me with a kind of pain in his eyes. Behind you. I whip around, facing the building. You're a good kid, Sonny. Lose consciousness in a second. I come to with the sun beaming on my face. Wake up in a pile of my own blood, crowbar at my side. My head aches like hell. I touch the back of my head. Just a flesh wound. I pick myself up and try not to vomit. Fail. I sit down and try to come to. Everything aches. I'm freezing. Wait, why am I freezing? The right wall of the cabin is full of holes. It looks like someone threw boulders through there. What the hell? Where's Grandpa? No sign of him. In fact, no sign of anything. I open the door and step outside. Check behind. The gates have been trampled. The chains are broken. I get closer. Those white things were crushed up rabbits. The horses half chewed them and spit them out. Start to piece everything together. Promptly vomit again. Long story short, I walked back to the cabin and picked up a few things. I picked up my grandpa's pipe and his bluegrass tobacco. Found a golden cross that he kept hidden in his cabinet. Drove home without stopping. Next day, I called a delivery boy and asked him to deliver to the house so I could see if I dreamed the whole thing. He told me the house was burned down.
I'd like to start off by saying that I don't have a fucking clue why I'm posting this on X. Or, really, at all. Maybe I'm afraid of dying or something. The events described in this story happened a month and a half ago in Shenandoah, West Virginia, although I typed this up about 2 weeks ago. I just haven't really had the guts to post this until what happened yesterday. The story starts in late September when my family went to go visit our relatives, who invited us to celebrate one of them, Desiree, getting like $2,000 in some scratch-off lottery thing. They live in this really fucking shitty part of Shenandoah that people from Charleston, Shepherdstown, and Ranson, basically the least rednecky parts of West Virginia, like to call Squalor Holler. It's way up on the mountain, and exactly like how everyone pictures it when they hear about it. Nothing but ramshackle shacks, rusty-ass rebuilt trailers, everything fucking covered in decades-old Christmas decorations because, They're all too busy being smelly rednecks to ever clean up. Real deliverance shit, just no rivers or canoes. The relatives we were visiting are absolutely confirmed inbreeders. All cousins fucking each other. We don't refer to them as aunt, uncle, whatever. Just relatives. Not terrible people or anything, just absolutely cartoonish, depressing hillbilly stereotypes. So anyway, we're up here in this godforsaken trailer. It sucks. There's like 8 of them, plus me, my dad, my mom, and my sister. About 2 hours in, my mom takes my cell phone so that I can start focusing on family time together, which is bullshit. All we did the whole time was eat TV dinners and be forced to watch NASCAR and shit. After like 6 hours of this shit, about 10 minutes before we're supposed to leave, it starts raining. We know how treacherous the roads can get up on the mountain, so we decide to wait for the rain to die down. Flash forward 2 hours later, it's fucking dark as hell, 10 o'clock, and there's a flood warning for the area. I have my phone back by this time. No reception though, of course. I'm playing Tetris and Texas Hold'em and stuff, when suddenly, I hear my dad start losing his shit in the next room. I walk over, and it turns out that they let slip that they'd buried their kid, Thomas, outside. And apparently were afraid the rain would wash up his body or some other horse shit. The kid was like 6. He was attacked by a dog, and they never told the cops. Just fucking buried him like he was a family pet. My dad's flipping his shit, and rightfully so because, you know, we live in the 21st century and all. So our relatives all say they'll sort it out in the morning. My parents tell me and my sister to stay in the same room as them during the night, and we do. None of us really suspected that they'd killed Thomas or anything, since they are really peaceful. They didn't even own any guns aside from this one old-timey double-barrel shotgun they had on a mantle. Nevertheless, we were creeped the fuck out, and intended to tell the cops in the morning, once we got to town. So, it was like 3 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. Power had gone out for the 5th time or so, and I'm not able to charge my dead phone. Worst part is, I could see Thomas's little grave right outside the window. Little cross on it and everything. And I assumed the kid couldn't have been buried deep at all since they were so worried about him just washing up out of the grave. So I was just fixated on it. Kept being drawn to looking out the window. And then, I saw the fucking worst thing in my life. Something was creeping through the trees toward the house. I stared at it for a while, but couldn't get a good look at it since it was raining and the brush was so thick. For a few minutes, I assumed it was 2 really pale horses, kind of ambling through the woods side by side. But then, it walked into the moonlight, and I saw that it was all one thing. Like a kind of human torso, but wider. It finally stepped into full view, and I saw it had something like 6 legs. Kind of somewhere between a beetle's legs and a horse's legs. 2 arms, right where someone would have normally have them, but they were about a half a foot longer than any normal man's arms. It had a bald head, but the face looked like some sort of fucking bizarre masquerade ball kind of mask. This fucking clenched up, furrowed forehead, and a nose that sort of looked like a crow's or a raven's beak. It didn't have eyes either, just like the depressions where eyes would go. It looked like it had a human mouth underneath its proboscis. What still strikes me to this day is that it seemed to have a penis too, like right on the abdomen where a normal person's dick would be. The thing moved sort of gracefully and made these soft thumping noises when it moved. It must have been like 7-8 feet tall, but sounded like it only weighed maybe 150 pounds at most. It starts walking towards Thomas's grave, and then I finally snap out of whatever trance I was in and just scream. My mom is the first to wake up, and I tell her to look out the window. She rushes over and doesn't really seem to understand what she's looking at. After a minute though, the thing bends down and starts pawing at the grave with its hands. My dad and Jasper rush in, and Jasper just fucking loses his shit. Screams like a little girl, runs back out of the room, yelling for his father, yelling, "It's outside! It came, and it's outside!" I look back, and see the thing is digging furiously at the ground, kicking up huge mounds of dirt. I hear these sounds of feet running around the house. I think they were looking for the shotgun. The thing reaches into the hole and grabs up what I assume was Thomas's body by the leg, in one hand. The thing kind of gallops back into the woods, snapping all these branches and shit. And that's when we all hear it. A kid crying. The sound of a child sobbing and crying from the direction that the thing took off in. We left as soon as the rain let up, at like 5 in the morning. I don't even think we told anyone at the house. Drove straight back to Ranson, only stopping for gas. No one said a word to each other. My family refuses to speak about what happened. I tried to bring it up once, just to make sure it was real. My dad told me to shut the fuck up, so I did. I typed this up about 3 weeks after it happened, but I just saved it to a notepad file and I left it alone. Never mentioned it to any of my friends or anything. Just tried to erase it from my mind by getting absolutely fucked up drunk whenever my thoughts lingered on it. It mostly worked, up until yesterday. See, I work at this gas station in Ranson from 8 p.m. to 3 a.m. I work the register, keep the place clean, and take out the trash. Yesterday, when I was bringing the trash bags over to the back of the building for the dude in the morning to take care of, I heard what I had assumed to be some junkie fucking around in the dumpster. I yelled at whoever it was a couple of times to get the hell out before I called the cops. But as I walked towards the source of the noise, I suddenly heard those same footsteps. That soft thump-thump. Hooves or feet or whatever the hell they were. I turned right around and went back into the store and hid behind the counter. I look over at the outside security monitor and see some kind of movement from just off screen. Something huge casting a shadow and moving. I catch a glimpse of, I don't know, an elbow or something. A pale limb darting in and out of view. It had to have been the same thing. I waited for it to leave, and after a while, it did. I woke up behind the counter at 6 a.m. this morning to my manager giving me this fucking look, like I'm a drug addict or something. Went home, typed the rest of this up, and that's about it. Anyone have any clue what the fuck happened here? Be me, 2 weeks ago. Out at the deer lease with my friend. He says, "Hey, Anon, I'm gonna head on out." I'm bummed because it's only 5 p.m. and we were supposed to spend the rest of the night out there. 10-4, dude. Catch you later. He leaves the blind and heads off through the woods towards the trucks. About 40 minutes later, I hear a tapping on the door. Look at the slide on the door. It's my buddy. He doesn't say shit, so I just let him in. "Thought you were heading out, man. Knew you weren't gonna quit on me." Notice he doesn't have his rifle. "Where's your gun, dude?" "Oh, left it at the truck." "Oh well." "Shit, you may as well have just gone home then." He just smiles and sat there. Didn't say a word except for the occasional grunt of acknowledgement and of interest. It weirds me out because he's normally a pretty social guy, always talking about UFC shit or Mass Effect. I ask, "You okay, bro?" All he says is, "Don't feel good. That's all." About 5:30 a.m., he says, "Hey, Anon, I'm gonna head on out." Before I can even reply, he's gotten up and exited the blind, and I can hear him tromping through the woods. At the time, I thought, well, thanks for scaring off the deer, fuckwit. But now that I think about it, he wasn't walking towards the trucks. He was walking kind of off the way. About 7 a.m., I decide, fuck it, I give up. Pack my shit and head to my truck. His truck is gone, so I think nothing of it. The reason I'm bringing this up is I talked to him earlier today, and I was asking if he felt better. And he looked at me confused and said, "What do you mean, Anon?" "You know, after you came back to the blind, you said you weren't feeling good. Figured that's why you weren't running your mouth about quatrain pussy." He looked at me like I grew a second head and said, "Anon, dude, I didn't come back to the blind. I drove home and got home at 8, and went the fuck to bed. So, yeah.
Years ago, I was a student using the GI Bill. I was older. Got a very nice work study as a security guard with the university. Most of the guards were older guys trying to get into the campus police force. Was told I would get an odd assignment because of my military background. The botany/biology department greenhouse complex. Meh, okay. Was told to read the post instructions carefully and obey them. The complex was outside radio range, before cell phones, and only one phone in the complex would work at night. The gates to the complex were opened by remote. If the gates were open, I was to leave and call the police from a truck stop miles away. If I saw anyone on the grounds as I drove in, I was to leave and call the police from the truck stop. All doors were to be shut and locked. I was to drive the car up to a side door where I could see the alarm panel. If and only if the panel confirmed all doors were shut and locked could I go in. Otherwise, leave and call the police. If the panel was all green, I was to park the patrol car so it blocked the side entrance. It was recessed. Lock the other car doors, get out, unlock the side door, lock and close the car door I had left, enter and reset the alarm. If I saw anyone at any time, I was to leave immediately and get to the car and call the cops from the truck stop. I thought the instructions were weird, but whatever. The rest of the instructions said I was to call the office every even hour from one phone. Pretty common. Since they did all sort of experiments, if a greenhouse had a sign on it, I was not to enter it. I was to not leave the building except to flee or at the end of my shift. No one except the police or guards I personally knew were from the group could be let in. I covered this place on a 10-hour shift, from 10 p.m. until 8 a.m., Friday through Sunday nights. The place is big and sprawling, with dozens of greenhouses connected by doors or almost tunnels in a sort of maze. Only the roofs are clear glass. The sides are this odd translucent plastic stuff you can almost see through. Also has a research office, lab building that is fucking freaky as hell. All sorts of machines humming and clicking, and all the east-west corridors have mirrors at the end. So as I walk around, I keep catching movement out of the corner of my eye. Luckily, I just have to check the labs at the very beginning and end to make sure the rooms are locked and lock them if they are not. Rest of the time, I'm just supposed to wander around the greenhouses and make sure there are no fires or leaks. In the middle of the greenhouses is a big geodesic dome heated greenhouse. It's amazing. It has trees, grass, flowers, a little waterfall and pond water feature. There are a few birds that got inside there, a couple frogs and even crickets. I remember very clearly the third weekend it started snowing, hard, and I sat in the dome eating a chicken salad sandwich watching the snow as I listened to crickets. I had no idea why the instructions were so grim, extreme. The next weekend though, something happened. I finished my shift, got my stuff together, and set the alarm so I had 2 minutes to leave. I left, shut the locked door, unlocked the car, got in, etc., just like the instructions, and started to leave. As I backed up, I saw tracks in the snow. It was still pretty dark and the lights from the exterior weren't the best, but it looked like footprints in the snow. Like someone had walked around the outside of the car, trying to get past it to the door. I looked around but didn't see anyone. The tracks looked like they came from the edge of the fence, straight to the car, back and forth 10 or 12 times, then off to circle the greenhouse. The light was bad, but the footprints looked like they were of bare feet. I got the hell out of there. By the time I got to the truck stop though, I had calmed down and figured I hadn't actually seen anyone. And with the gate closed, etc., it might have just been my supervisor checking to see if I was doing my job right. I didn't want the hassle of the cops, but when I got to the office, I told my supervisor and the manager what I had seen and explained why I didn't call. They were real still, asked if I was okay, and told me that if it happened again, I was to call the cops. A couple days later, my supervisor calls me on a day off and asks me to grab a beer with him. Workplace bonding, sure. Meet him that evening, have a few beers. He is obviously here for serious business. I'm worried I am being downsized or something. Finally, he starts to tell me the story about botany, what we called the location. About 12 years before the uni stopped letting people work in the building after dark. Insurance reasons, they said. The rumor was people kept seeing and hearing odd things at night. After a huge leak, the uni put security in the building full-time about 8 years before. Then 6 years before, a guard vanished. Now guys who work in security quit by not showing up all the time, and sometimes they quit by just leaving work, but they don't leave behind the car that got them there and their stuff in the building, usually. The new guard talked about hearing noises outside and tapping on windows and footprints in the snow. Then he quit because he wouldn't go back. Then 2 years later, another guard vanished, left behind the patrol car, his keys, and a wife. The uni didn't want to spend the money for 2 guards, and it was so far away that the supervisor couldn't visit all the time, so they came up with strict rules. The new guards would last a month or two, then the tapping and noises and stuff would scare them off. Then 2 years before I started, a guard died. He was found outside one of the emergency exits, seemingly beaten to death. They figured he was new, heard the noises, and went to check it out. Since then, they had rotated guys through a few weeks at a time, but everyone who knew the story thought botany was a punishment assignment. But for 2 years, no one had seen or heard odd things. So when I started, a combat vet, they figured they'd put me out there. Then I saw footprints. He was so serious I didn't have the heart to ask if he was messing with me. So I called other guys from the office. They all knew the story, all swore it was true. Some talked about seeing shadows through the greenhouse walls, or hearing tapping at the windows of the lab offices as they walked past, or finding their stuff moved that they had left behind when they patrolled. So I called the work-study office and took a different position. Fast forward 5 years, I've got my degree, having lunch when, boom, my old supervisor walks in. He's a cop now with the city, not the uni. I say hi, we catch up a little. After about 10 minutes, apologized for quitting with no notice. He got real still, said it was okay. They hired a new guy right away, and they only patrolled botany for about 2 more months. Then the unit decided to not patrol it anymore. They just installed a bunch of machinery to shut off the water if there was a leak. Said I should have stayed. No, Annan. They installed all that stuff for a reason. We put the new guy out there on botany. The 3rd weekend he didn't come back to the office, so we went out there. The alarms were still on. The car was parked where it was supposed to be. Everything looked like it should, but he wasn't there. All we found was his lunch in the dome by the pond.